Well, we've got a few fossil examples. All of them are not, well, all of them are fast fossil examples, but we've also got an extra element here, which is the flood fossil examples. So we're stepping out a little bit just from the fast fossils into the flood fossils. And as I've said many, many times, and I'll say it again, when you're looking for evidence of a flood, you're looking for evidence of water where water shouldn't be. I mean, think about it. If you've got a flood in your kitchen, the water is on the floor. It belongs in the sink. So when we're looking for evidence of flooding, you can use examples like mixed environments. You can use crocodiles and dinosaurs and fish and deep sea creatures and rolled pebbles and amber all mixed together as excellent evidence of a flood. You can use examples of creatures, elongated creatures, and elongated things like timber and wood and trees and stuff, which are all pointing in the same direction as excellent evidence of flowing water, flooding water, moving water that is actually mixing all these things together. Now, Glenn, I came here, 2 weeks ago?
Mm-hmm.
And I brought some presents as well, which we're going to use for the USA ministry. But I particularly bought some things that you don't have over here.
No, I didn't have that.
For that very specific purpose. Let's have a look at this rather spectacular fossil here, which is from the famous Jurassic Coast down in Lyme Regis in the UK. What we've got here, you see all the curly-whirlies? The curly-whirly ammonites, the deep-sea creatures, the cephalopods. And then you've got this sort of brown long thing just in the middle all the way along. Well, that is actually fossil wood. It's fossil timber. So what do we have here in this beautiful limestone nodule? Oh, limestone, it's definitely a deep sea environment. And you've got these curly-whirly creatures, the sea creatures buried next to fossil trees. And this is not unusual. We'll have to get you over there sometime and take you for a walk along the Jurassic coast, because the Jurassic deposits go all the way up through the United Kingdom. They start down south in the famous Jurassic coast. They go up to the west through Wales. They go up through the east, all the way up through Oxford, all the way up until you get to the Yorkshire coast and up into Scotland. In fact, the original Jurassic rocks are in Germany. So these do really go all over the world. And they all have evidence of flooding. Trees, land plants, and sea creatures buried together. Amazing stuff. Amazing evidence of not just rapid burial, because, well, you've watched the the crime scene programs, and they find the dead body, and they can work out how long the body has been dead based on, well, we were in the caves last night. What did we see there? Or rather, what did we smell there?
We smelled before we saw, and then we saw all the little creepy maggots. And as I went ahead, I was brushing the maggots away so that the ladies didn't have to see them.
So you can tell how long a creature's been dead based on how decayed and.
So that was one of the projects when I was a professor at the University of Tennessee that I had the opportunity to work on, was working with Arpad Voss and Dr. Bass at the University of Tennessee. They're one of the famous institutes for studying how long a body's been dead by what organisms are in the soil. And they wanted us to do the soil analysis. But my department head said he didn't want any of that material in our department. We weren't set up for dealing with decomposing bodies. So yes.
So it's based on how decayed it is. And you find the same thing with wood as well. John held up some examples of board wood where these creatures have worn through it and broken it down. But if you have a look at this wood, particularly the edges of the wood, you can see just how brilliantly preserved it is. There's no decay along the edges. There's no burrowing down. There's no eating. You can see it nice and clearly, can't you? See how long and straight and clear that defined edge is. There's no examples or evidence of decay at all, nor in any of the other creatures. So you're definitely looking at something that's been buried quickly. It's not driftwood that's been swept out to sea and bobbed around for months, waiting to slowly get waterlogged and sinked and been gnawed on and broken down. It's in beautiful condition. Well, here's another example. This is actually from your collection, John, here in the United States. It's one of the great big Moroccan face-ops trilobites. Let's see if we can hold it.
Now repeat that so everyone can hear you. It's in whose collection?
It's in my garage, but it's yours.
But it's one of these beautiful great big face-ops trilobites. And you can see if we can get some of the detail in, if it wants to focus. There we go. See some of the details in the eye?
Oh,
Absolutely
beautiful.
beautiful. So incredible detail, amazing detail. So it's certainly been buried quickly, but look at the thing in itself. You see how it's all sort of curled up and rolled up? Well, these sort of little arthropods, much like the other arthropods that are alive today, we call them woodlouse in the UK. You call them roly-polies or pill bugs and things like that. You poke them about and they roll up when they're frightened, and it certainly seems to be the case with these trilobites, and that's what they did. You find them sometimes completely rolled up. In fact, we've got some little examples. If you hold that up, Glenn, I'll hold this up. Can you see the little, there's its head, look there. See if we can get it into focus. There we go. There's its head there. We're going to do a full roll of it all the way around. It's completely rolled up. Look at it side on. Hey, look at that. It's a rolled up, roly-poly sea-like creature. Now, that tells you two things. Number one, this didn't live there, die there, and get buried there. This has actually been buried in action. It's been buried alive, and it's been buried while it's frightened of something. Now, I wonder what could have frightened it. Maybe a big oncoming sea of slurry of sediment and everything, and limestone. But it does show you that this is a creature that has been buried while it's still alive. It hasn't died and waited and for hundreds of years to slowly be buried and fossilized. It's been buried very quickly for sure. Well, let's use another example here. Again, John, this is from one of the collections that we've been going through. But have a look at some of the stunning detail that you can see on this fern here. I mean, just look at some of the, and it's actually, I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, but it's actually 3D as well. Can you see how it kind of stands up out of the rock? This is a sort of carbonized, fossilized fern. It's absolutely beautiful. Again, this is a type of supposedly coal type environment, swamp type environment where they were living and dying and getting, and yet in swamps today, what happens to things like ferns and leaves and stuff when they fall in?
Yeah, they're going to be decomposed fairly quickly.
Very quickly. In fact, it can be quite acidic, can't it? Yeah. Really break down the materials, and yet you simply don't see that in the fossil record. It's beautifully preserved with no damage, decay, or anything at all. Absolutely amazing. Even if, let's see how close I can get it and keep it in focus. Even the internal details are actually still all there. Well, we're going to use two more examples, Glenn. So if you can go and grab that big fossil over there while I hold this one up, because this is pretty amazing as well. Can you tell what it is? It's one of those dinosaur footprints that's been highlighted to sort of give you a much clearer indication of where it is. Now, footprints are an interesting thing because, of course, you can walk down the beach. You need the material to be soft. You don't really tend to leave footprints in hard concrete. It needs to be wet. So your material needs to be wet as you're sort of walking along and leaving these footprints. And your sand, you can go to the beach and leave footprints there today, but what happens the next time the tide comes? They're going
to be washed away.
You just destroy them. So again, you need a material, a mechanism for not only having it soft to produce your footprints, you need something to be able to solidify and bury these footprints without actually washing them away. So again, flowing water that's not just water going to wash it, but water that's going to bury it, a slurry of sediment which is going to preserve it. So trace fossils like these footprints are also very good indication of rapid burial as well, not waiting around for millions of years before they get buried. And one final example, and we have a huge example of this in the UK, and you've got an even bigger example in Australia, John. You see these rather beautiful limestone. This is Devonian, named after the rocks in Devon in the UK. But these are actually from the Atlas Mountains. And you can see where they've been carved down and polished up. Can you see all of the beautiful orthoceroids, sort of squid-like creatures, straight-shelled ammonites? And you notice how they're all pointing in the same way. Now, even first-year geology, when I was at university, they taught you that when you have elongated fossils that are pointing the same way, whether they be squid fossils, orthoceroids, whether they be logs and trees and stuff like that, you have indication of flowing water where these creatures have been washed into place, because they, generally speaking, tend to align themselves. So rather interesting example, because this is just a tiny little sample. We have one that is in our museum that's huge. You have one, John, that takes up most of a wall. And
Yes.
yet this is just a tiny snapshot of the hundreds of millions, if not billions, of these creatures that are found in the Atlas Mountains. In fact, if you go on to other creationist websites, the one thing they'll talk about with the nautiloids, the orthoceroids, is the Grand Canyon. Well, I've seen examples from the Grand Canyon, and I have to say, having grown up with these things as research, they're just not as impressive. I think it's more to do with the fact that it's the Grand Canyon than the actual fossils there. So these are from Morocco, and we would love to take a team out there to film them, because the stuff that you can get is just absolutely spectacular. So do keep watching, because we'd love to go out there one day, and maybe with your help we will. But you can see, no matter where you look, no matter what you dig up in the way of fossils, and this was just a tiny little snapshot from the many hundreds, if not thousands, of fossils that we could have chosen from our collection, that all show examples of rapid burial, and many of them show examples of flood burial. And then, of course, if you want it in a very quick nutshell, how do we know the size of the flood? It's easy. See how big the deposits are. Because it was Professor Derek Ager that pointed out, really one of the first people to point out the fact that if you trace things like the Cretaceous chalk, if you trace the Carboniferous, or in the United States, what do you call the Carboniferous over here?
It's the Pennsylvanian.
The Pennsylvanian and the Mississippian.
Yes.
Who wouldn't possibly go with the English names, right? And you'll find that these rock layers go all around the world. And us at Creation Research, we've dug up Cretaceous fossils from the States, from the UK, from Australia. You've dug up the Jurassic stuff all over the world. We've dug up all sorts of these fossils, and you can really trace whether they're a global deposit like the Devonian rocks, or whether they're a much more local deposit like some of the things that the Green River Formation produces.
Joe,
But either way, it's a rapid formation for sure. John?
Can I just throw in two things? One is you're in Tennessee at the moment, and there is an old quarry in the middle of, just outside the middle of Nashville, which has that bed which shows up basically in the Grand Canyon, that nautiloid bed. Well, it used to be exposed in the bottom of the quarry, but watch out for the cottonmouth snakes that are there. I met my first cottonmouth down that quarry as well. But there's a second one. Our friend Transbluency is still struggling and saying it's not about did fossils form fast. Nobody argues they didn't. But the reality is, Transbluency, they do. When the textbooks start saying fossils can only form quickly, and when the British Natural History Museum reviews their stupid statement about fishes fall to the bottom and slowly get covered up, when the museum we went to the other day removes the argument that dinosaurs lived, died, fell to the ground, etc., when they remove all of those, then we'll welcome you with open arms for that statement. Until then, it's a false statement. It is about how quickly fossils could form, but not just about that. It's also about how big the beds actually are. And as Joe said, you need to ask the right questions, or Diane said that, and Joe's applying it to what would you look for the evidence of a massive flood? What would you look for the evidence that mussel shells have always been mussel shells? Ask the right questions, and it's the only way you can ever get to the right answers. And of course, you'll discover God has never lied to you, etc.